Hey guys, how's it going? Check this out. These videos that are coming up next are already relatively old productions from the channel. At the time, they didn't perform that well, but they're excellent productions, great stories, very well researched and told. So I decided to make this compilation with several episodes so you can binge watch, and this is an extra video, alright? So I'm going to release them in sequence now. How safe are we really? Ask yourself that question more than once, and you'll really start to worry about the harm that can reach us when we least expect it. Imagine you're sitting on a church pew during a comforting mass, right after the priest ends it with a hymn of praise to be sung. A man, until then unsuspected, stands up with two guns in his hands and starts shooting mercilessly at the worshippers present. Even if you're not religious, you have to agree that a church is, or at least should be, a place of peace, right? A place that those who attend usually call the house of God. It was an ordinary Tuesday when life flows through the streets of big urban centers, like the city of Campinas, the second largest in the interior of São Paulo, and famous for its executive business hub. But some people always stop to turn to the Creator and offer Him their thanks. And that's what some men and women did who unexpectedly had their lives taken in a sad, shocking, and unfortunate coincidence. The systems analyst Euler Fernando Grandolfo, 49 years old, was not there to take communion or to confess the sins he carried with him, but rather to promote what he would have called a big thing. In a note from his diary, which was later found by investigators on the case, Euler was a lonely depressive with a persecution complex who lived a middle-class life, living with his father, weakened by the recent loss of his mother, at home in a high-end condominium in the city of Valinhos, a neighboring city to Campinas. In their statements, family members said he was a reclusive type who hardly ever left the house, and they feared he might commit suicide because of a treatment he had already undergone. But some neighbors felt uncomfortable with his presence, saying it was threatening. He had no criminal record, but according to information from Detective Jose Henrique Ventura, Euler had already made several calls to the police, claiming to be the victim of persecution. However, these alleged persecutions were never confirmed, let alone clarified. About his past, it was later learned that he was an intelligent, studious young man and even attractive to the women of his time. He was even compared to the actor who first played Superman in the movies, Christopher Reeve. An ex-girlfriend of his, with whom he worked as an assistant at the public prosecutor's office in São Paulo, said that Euler was very methodical regarding people's social behavior and that he didn't mind ending friendships that didn't fit his way of seeing life. The fact is that according to investigations, Euler spent about 10 years planning the attack he would carry out on that fateful afternoon of December 11, 2018, when he took the lives of 5 people and injured 3 others, not to mention the trauma he caused to so many more. The barbarity would have worldwide repercussions, leading political authorities and even the Pope himself to express their sorrow over the tragedy, which was judged and declared as inexplicable. Armed with a 9mm pistol and a .38 caliber revolver, both with their serial numbers filed off, weapons possibly purchased in Paraguay during one of his trips to the neighboring country. This fact was also recorded in his notes, and having enough ammunition to kill and destroy the lives of a much larger number of victims. Everything was stored in a backpack. Euler then entered the Cathedral of Our Lady of the Conception, located right in the city center and just a few steps from a police station, and he sat down complacently on one of the benches next to the others around him. His religious upbringing had been Catholic, but he eventually distanced himself from the church for personal reasons that led him to become a fierce critic of the church, and of his father, who even became a religious minister and, according to him, wasn't good for anything else. When he got up, he put his murderous plan into action, which, although not confirmed, was considered to be irreversibly premeditated. His shots hit 4 men who died instantly: Sidney Vitor Monteiro, 39 years old, Jose Eudes Gonzaga, 68, Christopher Gonçalves dos Santos, 38 years old, and Eupidio Alves Coutinho, 67. The fifth to be hit with 2 shots, Heleno Severo Alves, 84 years old, was rescued by the SAMU team. Unable to survive his injuries, he died the next day. Jandira Prado Monteiro, 65, mother of Sidney Monteiro, and Maria de Fatima Frazão Ferreira, 68, were rescued with minor injuries and are not at risk. The same happened with another man, 64 years old, who was not identified. The gunshots were heard by passers-by around the cathedral, and quickly, police officers who were stationed near the church rushed to respond to what their unbelieving ears had just identified. Euler went to the entrance door to exchange gunfire with them, but after being shot in the chest, he realized his heinous plan had failed and that the end of his life, as well as the torment he had just caused, was truly coming to an end. Running to one of the side altars of the church, he decided to commit the act that for many represents the utmost cowardice, and for a few others the greatest courage of all, shooting himself in the head. The Christian belief teaches and holds that with death, all sins are forgiven, and with that being the case, Father Omari Tomasi, who celebrated Mass before the violent tragedy that befell those faithful, asked for prayers for the victims and also for the shooter. So then, dear abducted ones, 2 questions for deep reflection arise. Which is greater, the pain or the forgiveness? On May 16, 1937, the Italian Letícia Toureaux, 30 years old, was murdered inside a train car in Paris. During the trip between one station and another, a journey that took only 90 seconds, her death was not forgotten because she was the first homicide victim in the French subway. Because of the strange circumstances of the crime and the facts about her that the investigations later revealed. Daughter of Italy, in the bilingual region of the Italian Alps, she was the daughter of Jean-Baptiste Nerissa, a construction worker and farmer. However, after her father returned from World War I, the family's life was never the same, leading to the couple's separation. Letícia then emigrated to neighboring France at the beginning of her adolescence, accompanied by her mother and siblings. With this move, they were also trying to escape the socio-political reality of their country, which had become quite impoverished after the conflict. In 1926, at the age of 19, she started working in a ceramics factory where she met and fell in love with Ju Tu-ho, the owner's son. 3 years later, they got married in secret since Ju's parents did not approve of their son being involved with someone from a lower social class. But in 1934, shortly before Ju passed away from tuberculosis, he revealed the truth to his family. Letícia, after becoming a widow, had to leave the house where she lived with her husband. She then moved into a small apartment 50 meters from Pierre Auguste's subway station, which was convenient for her because on some nights of the week, the young woman worked at the cloakroom of a nightclub called Ace of Hearts, from where she left late, always catching the last subway before the line closed. At the club, where she was known by the name Yolande, she also had the option to dance with customers who paid her for it. It was a good deal for her, because in this case, she could have fun and enjoy a bit of the city's nightlife while earning her living. During the day, she had another job at the Maxi Laboratory, a manufacturer of shoe polish and similar products. There, Letícia was well liked by her colleagues and carried out her duties responsibly. It is known that the Italian woman was independent and brave as she walked around the city late at night, and 3 days before she died, she suffered an alleged attempted robbery when a man attacked her at the door of her building as she was arriving from her night job. She defended herself and managed to get inside the building. Later, she recounted these events in a humorous way and refused to let a neighbor accompany her on the way from home to transportation. Her death occurred on Sunday, May 16th, precisely at 6:28 post-meridium, according to police records, right after she entered the subway at Porta de Charenton station, which at that time was the last stop on Line 8 that crossed the city. She was seen wearing a dark blue dress and a white hat when she entered a first-class empty carriage alone. At the next station, called Port Toureaux, 6 passengers divided into 2 groups of 3 entered the same carriage where Letícia was. Before the train departed, someone approached her and asked if they could open a window to improve the ventilation. But when they lightly touched her arm, supposedly to wake her up, the Italian woman's body fell to the floor, spreading a sea of blood in front of her. Thus, terrified, everyone saw that a knife was stuck in her throat. The violent blow that killed her drove the blade in up to the hilt, even cutting her spinal cord, as the autopsy report later confirmed. But how did the criminal manage to kill her without anyone seeing? And what were the reasons for this violent death? The investigators initially looked for a suspect among the regulars at the Ace of Hearts. But the precision of the attack pointed to a professional killer, not a jealous lover or a dissatisfied customer. In fact, the weapon of choice already seemed to be a message from some Italian mobster. However, no fingerprints or other evidence were found on the blade or at the scene. Soon, Leticia's life was thoroughly investigated, and with that, the police learned that she was hiding several secrets, and that a double life went far beyond her night job at the club, whether at the reception or on the dance floor. She also worked for a private detective agency delivering messages and packages. In this case, the Ace of Hearts was a good place to operate without raising suspicion. But Letícia also worked on investigations involving suspicions of marital infidelity. In these cases, she could either follow the husband or the wife, potential adulterers, or discreetly approach the men in search of evidence. This activity of catching unfaithful spouses could certainly have led to enmities and given rise to acts of revenge. But it was just another dead end for the detectives. From this fact, several theories were developed about Letícia being an informant for the Paris police through the agency. And even a spy infiltrated in the terrorist group known as Cagoulés, or the Hooded Ones. In this world of espionage, the Italian woman would be the lover of the well-known journalist Gabriel Janté, who was responsible for smuggling weapons to the Cagoulés. They tried, among other things, to overthrow the powerful French unions of the time in order to bring France closer to the fascist ideals defined by Benito Mussolini in Italy after the war, a story that the group marked with kidnappings, torture, and several murders. This line of investigation led to 2 hypotheses. Leticia's death may have been ordered in retaliation for the actions of that subversive group, or the Cagoulés may have discovered that she was a spy and an informant and executed her for that reason. The espionage theory gained strength when police informants linked her murder to 3 other homicides that occurred in France in 1937. The victims of these other crimes were Dmitry Novichiny, a Russian economist who was stabbed to death in the Bois de Bourgogne on January 26, and Carlo Inello Rosselli, Italian anti-fascist exiles who were shot on a road in Normandy on June 9. Thus, in January 1938, the police and journalists had strong suspicions about the identity of Leticia's killer, although the motive was uncertain. Confessions were obtained under torture and later retracted and disregarded. One aspect to mention is that right after Leticia's death, the sensationalist newspapers in Paris exploited every detail of the case to the fullest, driving the public almost to hysteria. Those who used the subway as regular transportation were afraid that the killer could strike again, especially women who walked alone. That episode, which happened a few days earlier at the door of the Italian woman's building, when she narrowly escaped from an unknown attacker, was carefully analyzed. But it was not possible to ensure that it was connected to the second attack and to the consummation of her death. 5 days later, The pseudonym Yolande and other details related to the victim's extracurricular activities became the talk of Paris, and a shift occurred in public opinion. People now started to consider her a social climber, that she had tried to scam the family of her late husband, with whom she supposedly had a secret relationship that was rejected by the Toureaux family. Others saw her as a traitor to the country that had welcomed her. After years, the case of Letícia Toureaux's death was closed without being solved. There were many tensions and political interests at play, few clues, and countless assumptions. All of this contributed to her death being considered a perfect crime. When screams were heard at 3 o'clock in the morning at number 8763 Wonderland Avenue in the Laurel Canyon section of Los Angeles, California, the neighborhood didn't care about what might be happening. After all, it could very well have been another party, one of those orchestrated by the Wonderland gang led by Ronald Lee Lanius, or simply Ron, a notorious drug dealer whose house was a constant scene of endless trouble filled with noise and debauchery at drug-fueled parties with loud shouting and violent behavior. The next day, around 4 in the afternoon, a team of furniture assemblers working at the house next door heard moans from Susan, Ron's wife, and decided to go into the house. Once inside, they came across a scene where human savagery seemed to have created a masterpiece and left it there for anyone daring enough to witness it. On that summer afternoon of July 1st, 1981, the police received a call reporting 4 people dead and 1 seriously injured. The victims were Ron Lanius, Billy Deverell, Barbara Richardson, and Joy Miller, brutally beaten to death, as well as Susan, who was found in agony. 3 detectives then, namely Sam Nickel, Lois Cruz, and Mike Patters, were assigned to the case. And right away, they suspected it was yet another violent score settling between drug dealers. And that's when this story jumps out of the box and takes on a bizarrely exciting twist, so to speak. Over time, the investigation led to clues that brought the police to John Holmes, a renowned legend of American porn from the 70s, who, due to problems related to his frenzied cocaine addiction, could no longer find work, and he was suffering a crushing ostracism that drove him into financial ruin. It was found that he was friends with Ed Nash, a nightclub owner and figure in the local organized crime scene, to whom he owed money because he couldn't sustain his addiction. And because of that, he ended up getting involved with Ron's gang. He gave them the opportunity to set up a robbery at Nash's house, raising a good amount of money and then rewarding him with a satisfactory share. So, on July 29th of that year, Ron and his gang carried out the robbery in a brutal way, showing that they weren't messing around. This ended with Nash's bodyguard, Gregory DeWitt Dials, being injured. Nash began to suspect John Holmes, who had been at his house on the day of the robbery. So he sent Dials to bring Holmes in for a private interrogation. Holmes was caught walking around Hollywood wearing one of Nash's rings, and after being tied to a chair and used as a punching bag with death threats not only to him but also to his family, he decided to spill the beans and give up the names of the robbers. In his desire to get revenge and reclaim the respect he had earned in the business, Nash served his dish of vengeance cold. 2 days after the robbery at his residence, in the early hours of July 1, 1981, a group of Nash's men broke into the Wonderland Avenue house and brutally beat Ron Lanius and those who were with him with hammers and iron pipes. Apparently, they were all killed while sleeping, as the bodies were found in the bedrooms of the house. But miraculously, Susan, Lanius's wife, survived, but with very serious after effects due to brain damage that caused her amnesia, and they had to surgically remove part of her skull, in addition to her losing part of a finger. Tracy Raymond McCurdy and David Clay Lindy were the lucky ones from Ron's gang who weren't present at the house that fateful night. Lindy was doing drugs with a prostitute in a motel, and McCurdy stayed at home. Los Angeles Police Department detectives Tom Landy and Robert Souza searched Nash's house days after the crime and found $1 million worth of cocaine, as well as some belongings from the Wonderland Avenue house. And due to Holmes's palm print found at the crime scene, he was arrested and charged with the murders. Prosecutor Ron Cohen tried to pin everything on him, but his lawyers managed to present him as a potential victim who had been severely coerced into taking the killers to the scene where the murders occurred. After a long 3-week trial, Holmes was acquitted of the crimes on June 26, 1982, but he got 110 days in jail for contempt of court and for refusing to cooperate with the authorities. Later, he reportedly told his wife, Sharon Gabnini, that he knew the Wonderland gang, and that, on that deadly night, he had taken 3 criminals to the drug house and led them inside, where he just stood by, witnessing the entire bloody attack. Sharon later said in an interview that the next morning, Holmes came home with his clothes splattered with blood, but he never revealed the names of the killers to her. Then, in 1990, Ed Nash and Gregory DeWitt Dials went to trial for planning and carrying out the murders, but even with a prosecution witness, they managed to get away with it. In 2000, Nash got caught in an investigation for drug trafficking and money laundering. And, cornered in his 70s with several illnesses, he made a plea deal and admitted to bribing the jury and ordering the robbery at Ron's house. But he vehemently denied any involvement in the murders. He got 4 years in prison and a $250,000 fine. As for John Holmes, the actor, he died on March 13, 1988 from complications related to human immunodeficiency virus, taking his dirtiest secrets to the grave. His persona served as the basis for the 1997 film Boogie Nights by Paul Thomas Anderson. This story made it to the big screen in 2003 with the film Wonderland, directed by James Cox, in which Val Kilmer portrays Holmes in a hypnotic and tormented way. What must his life really have been like? Today's case also makes the list of the most outrageous cases in Brazilian criminal history. Today we're going to talk about the Polyana Borges case. It was supposed to be just another car theft ordered by the highly profitable and violent crime industry in Goiânia back in 2009. The model was a black Chevrolet Prisma. After the theft, its chassis would be tampered with and it would enter the criminal vehicle cloning scheme which fueled and sustained that illegal market. And it was while driving a car like that on the morning of September 23rd that the publicist, Polyana Arruda Borges Leopoldino, 26 years old, left her house heading to the Pontifical Catholic University Goiás campus, where she would give a lecture that would mark Communication Week. Since she was a successful professional in that field, but the problem is that she wouldn't make it there, which would start one of the most outrageous and unjust cases in Brazilian criminal history. Besides being a terrible nightmare for her family and for those who loved and knew her. 4 criminals had the mission to steal the car, which had been ordered by Django Gomes Ferreira, who was working for Leandro Garces Carvalho. They were Assad Eider de Castro, Deberson Ferreira Leandro, Lavonier da Silva Neiva, and Marcelo Barros Carvalho. The group of degenerate robbers was fired up after a night fueled by cocaine and alcohol. And when they approached Polyana, they decided it wouldn't just be a simple robbery, choosing a cunning plan B, which they carried out in the heat of the moment. Surrendered, the young woman was put in the back seat, and they took the car to the area around Mata do Corrego Caveirinha in the Humaitá residential area in the northern region of the capital. In despair, realizing the disgusting and cowardly violence she was about to suffer, Polyana fought for her honor and dignity. But unfortunately, that was not enough to prevent her from being raped by that disgusting gang and shot to death by Assad, one of her tormentors, who later said he couldn't stand her rejection and therefore decided to kill her. Realizing the chaos of the situation, the group then set fire to the vehicle, which was abandoned on Chavantes Street in the Caraíbas residential area. The police found the car on the same day, and along with it, Polyana's belongings, which at first led them to believe it was a possible kidnapping. However, Polyana's body was found in the Caveirinha thicket 2 days later. With all the signs of severe sexual violence and murder by firearm, between investigations and arrests, 2 years went by in this case, which was marked by some rather strange twists and turns, so to speak. It was believed that, due to the notorious media coverage of the case at the time of the crime, the progress of the police investigations would be swift and effective. But police chiefs and precincts went through the case without presenting an effective conclusion. And in what seemed most intriguing and smelled like a cover-up, 2 of the criminals who actively participated in Polyana's death, Debberson and Lavanier, were shot and killed less than a year after the crime. Which wasn't exactly bad news, but it ended up hindering the police investigation since Debberson was an informant for both the civil and military police, and according to sources reporting on the case, moved freely through the region's police stations and battalions. This murky fact ended up putting the credibility of the authorities involved in the case in doubt, because it was suspected that, at least indirectly, some public agents might have had dirty hands in relation to the crime. After all, the car theft industry in that region had always generated a lot of money, and it was no public secret that corrupt police officers were benefiting from that illegal opportunity. On October 11th, 2012, those who remained alive were tried and sentenced to the excessive penalties of Brazilian justice. Assad Haidar, the rejected one, as you may remember, who had shot Polyana 8 times, got 45 years in prison, while Marcelo got 25 years and 8 months. Diango Gomes, the one who ordered the robbery, got 23 years and 2 months, and Leandro Garces got 21 years and 2 months. Judge Wilton Miller determined that the sentences should be served in a closed regime. But in a country where the law seems to serve criminals better than their victims, 8 years later, only Assad was still in prison, which shows us that our justice system does not have a preference for common sense. That's to say the least, and to keep some erudition in presenting the case, isn't it, my dear abducted ones? Marcelo, Diango, and Leandro moved, respectively, to the semi-open and then open regime starting in 2019. And the one who suffered the most from the bitterness of this absurd story, with no real punishment, was Tanya Borges, Polyana's mother, who, as an unwavering guardian of the honor and memory of her beloved daughter, did not resign herself in the face of the injustice she was presented with. In an essay she wrote, as a woman with a background in literature, published on March 8, 2021, International Women's Day, she made it clear that Brazilian civilization was built on machismo and violence against women. She emphasized that, besides her daughter, there are many other Polyanas who are raped and killed throughout the country. Much more than a cry of outrage from a mother who lost her daughter in such a brutal way, her accusation reflects the data that shows, without any manipulation, that violence against women has only been increasing since then. And the greatest proof of this is that 11 years after Polyana's death, the imposition of the abusive will of men like her tormentors seems to prevail, without any fair and properly strict punishment for the perpetrators. According to Tanya, her daughter didn't say no to the robbery, but she did say no to the sexual violence, which unfortunately didn't help at all. As a mother who will never stop loving her daughter, even though she no longer has her by her side, Tanya said that, for her, the criminals convicted of the crime are already dead. Because that's the kind of thinking that comforts her, since if she thought they were still alive and enjoying the impunity they were granted, she would rather be dead. And this, without a doubt, let's be honest, must be the feeling of many families who have lost loved ones and suffer legal mockery and trials we see out there, right? What these families feel is the mockery of this country's outdated laws. You can find strong examples of this statement in all the playlists on the channel. Her strength to live comes from the vivid and joyful memories that Polyana left behind, which, with the power of a mother's and daughter's love, refuse to die. And it is through this unbreakable bond that she overcomes any injustice. And may Polyana Borges remain alive. On September 18, 2017, in the city of Santos, on the coast of São Paulo, Matheus Garcia Vasconcelos Alves, 24 years old, left his college classes early, but he didn't come back home. His parents, already very worried, around midnight that day, received a call from the hospital informing them that Matheus had been in an accident and that the parents needed to come to the hospital. When they arrived at the hospital, Matheus's parents received the terrible news that he had passed away. Matheus was found still alive around 10 o'clock at night on Nicolau Guirão Pérez Street, a street in downtown São Vicente, which is about 30 minutes from his home. He was lying face down on the ground and had a gunshot wound to the back of his neck. Matheus was rescued and taken to São Vicente Municipal Hospital, but he passed away on the way. The news about the death of Matheus Garcia, a well-known athlete in the sport he practiced in the region, was reported in all newspapers and social media. While the investigations were starting, the Brazilian Confederation of Hockey and Skating published a note of condolence for the passing of the Brazilian national hockey team athlete. Several friends made posts expressing their outrage over the death of Matheus, who was still so young and died in such a cruel and sudden way. Even international newspapers talked about the Brazilian athlete, who was reportedly executed, and paid tribute to him. Right away, investigators suspected it was a robbery followed by murder, since Matheus was found with his phone charger in his hand, but his phone was missing. The police authorities requested security camera footage from residents in the area to help with the investigation. With the footage already reviewed, they identified the culprit 12 hours after the crime. The killer was the military police officer Jarbas Colfore Neto, who was 23 years old at the time and was identified by his superiors in the department where he worked. He was detained on September 19, 2017, inside the 39th Military Police Battalion of São Vicente, where he performed administrative duties. After his detention, the Public Security Department reported that he had already been removed from his street duties because he was facing an administrative process for dismissal from the force. According to the information, Jarbas had been caught with drugs in his own locker inside the battalion and was being investigated for drug trafficking. Jarbas graduated from the Advanced Soldier Training course in 2016, and less than a year after starting his activities in the force, he was caught with illegal substances. Jarbas Neto confessed to the crime and stated that the motive was passion-related. Because according to him, Matheus was harassing and stalking his girlfriend. And since he felt she was in danger, he ended up arranging a meeting with Matheus, but went too far and killed him to protect his family. But the messages found on Jarbas' cell phone showed a different story. Matheus, Jarbas, and Jarbas' girlfriend, whose name was not identified to protect her identity, were friends and even studied together at school for about 10 years. Before Jarbas and the girl started a relationship, Matheus had shown interest in her, and Jarbas never agreed with or forgot about that. Although Jarbas and his girlfriend had been in a relationship for more than 4 years and even had a 3-year-old child together, he was very jealous and began to suspect that his girlfriend might be betraying his trust with Matheus, even though she denied everything. But despite that, still not satisfied, the man created a profile on a social network pretending to be the girl and started using that account to talk to Matheus, pretending, of course, to be the young woman. After 6 months, he managed to convince Matheus to meet her at that address. saying that it was supposedly her cousin's house and that they could talk calmly, more at ease there. That night, Matheus took a rideshare car, arriving at the designated place around 9:45 p.m. At the same time, Jarbas was also heading to the place with another rideshare driver. He asked this driver to park in a more distant spot and walk to the meeting point. Once there, he waited for Matheus to arrive. And from the security cameras that were later analyzed, you can see that at 9:49, post-mortem Jarbas approaches Matheus. He takes his phone, makes the young man kneel on the sidewalk, and then shoots him in the back of the neck. After committing the crime, Jarbas fled the scene. All of this happened in a short span, about 2 minutes. The driver who took Jarbas to the location was also taken into preventive custody, accused of being an accomplice because, according to the public prosecutor's office, this man gave moral support to the perpetrator of the homicide. But the driver defended himself, saying he didn't know what had happened because he had parked the car far away, and he couldn't see the crime or even know that it was an ambush for Matheus. When Jarbas came back to the car, he was acting normal, showing no signs of anything unusual. With this statement, the driver excused himself from knowing what had happened. The fact is that the case against him was actually dismissed. According to the investigation, Jarbas didn't just suspect Matheus Garcia. He is said to have sent messages to several other men whom he suspected his wife might have had some romantic involvement with, and he allegedly tried to arrange meetings with these other men as well. But the only one who accepted was Matheus, which we can assume was because he already knew the woman and had a friendship with her during high school. When questioned, Jarbas' wife stated that she never had any involvement with Matheus, and that it had been over a year since they last spoke and they hadn't had any personal contact for more than 3 years, which was later actually proven by the investigation. On September 29th, the administrative process against Jarbas was concluded, and he was dismissed from the São Paulo military police. That same day, the crime reenactment took place, but Jarbas refused to participate. On November 10th, 2020, Jarbas Neto was brought to trial, accused of the murder of Matheus Garcia. In this trial, the prosecutors managed to prove that Matheus never had any involvement with Jarbas' girlfriend, and that everything had been a product of imagination, and that Jarbas had fantasized the whole situation in a paranoid way. They also emphasized the fact that Jarbas had approached other men pretending to be his girlfriend with trivial conversations. And they concluded that Jarbas wanted to know who would be interested in his girlfriend and that he would have shot anyone who showed such interest in her. On January 26, 2021, Jarbas was sentenced to 19 years, 7 months, and 6 days, a sentence that must be served in a closed regime. He was also denied the right to appeal the decision while free. As of this script's completion, Jarbas is still serving his sentence at Pinheiros 3 Provisional Detention Center. The body of Matheus Garcia Vasconcelos Alves was laid out at the Memorial Ecumenical Necropolis Cemetery in Santos, where he lived with his parents, and thousands of people attended the funeral ceremony to pay their respects. The city held 3 days of mourning, honoring Matheus with a trophy named after him. It was awarded at the Brazilian Under-20 Hockey Championship in November 2021 in Santos. A mysterious disappearance revealed by chance. Geovana Costa Martins dos Santos disappeared on a Friday morning. In one of the televised searches, Mr. Sidney Martins, Geovana's father, stated the following: "She is alive, and she is with someone." But what the following days would reveal, however, could not be more shocking. Jacareí, a city located in the state of São Paulo, more precisely in the metropolitan region of Val do Paraíba and the North Coast. Geovana's parents, Mr. Ana Lucia and Mr. Sidney Martins, gave an initial statement about the case. According to Mr. Sidney, the 13-year-old teenager woke up on May 20th, 2022 and had her breakfast as usual. At a certain time that morning, Geovana announced that she was going out, and when her father asked where she was going, the girl simply said she was going to a friend's house, but didn't say the name. The morning was already coming to an end, and the father then, worried, around noon, according to his account, decided to go out and look for his daughter. But despite talking to some of Geovana's friends, the man had no success in finding her. When they realized that no one knew Geovana's whereabouts, family and friends began searching for the girl. As is common and recommended in those first days, Geovana's disappearance was reported at the city's police precinct. Posters were made with the girl's photo, along with her family's phone number. And later, on May 24th, Geovana's mother made a post on a social network asking that if anyone had control of security cameras, they point them toward the surrounding streets and check the footage to see if Geovana appeared in any of them. Also on that same day, May 24th, a report aired on Cidade Alerta, a program on the Record Network, where information provided by the young girl's parents made the case even more detailed. Geovana was not in the habit of leaving without telling her parents, and on that day, the 20th, she left with only the clothes she was wearing and left her phone charging at home. Something unusual for her. Here, it clearly feels like she intended to leave and come back soon, if that was really the truth of what happened. With the police report filed and the case made public, reports of sightings of Geovana started to appear. In one of them, a woman claims she saw the girl near a school around 6:20 in the morning, and she seemed to be scared. According to this informant, Geovana was accompanied by a young man and the two were talking. Another report says that Geovana was actually riding on the back of a motorcycle with a dark-skinned young man in Santa Branca. But it's not certain whether this reference to Santa Branca means the neighborhood in the city of Jacareí or the neighboring city, which is the municipality of Santa Branca. If it were the neighboring city, the girl would have had to travel more than 17 kilometers from her home to that city. But the fact is that despite the information provided, Geovana was not found. Another point raised about the case was a live stream that Geovana did a week before her disappearance. The report states the girl was with a younger friend while live streaming on a social network, until a man allegedly joined the live stream and exposed his private parts. Geovana then reportedly ended the live stream, and when questioned, she said she didn't know this man. The investigation was then launched, and several lines of inquiry were considered to determine the possible causes of the teenager's disappearance. The initial clues were almost non-existent, with no way to locate the girl by her cell phone and no messages that could reveal any important details. So, the investigation would probably rely mainly on the information provided by those who lived with Geovana. According to these accounts, the girl was well liked by friends and neighbors and had no involvement with drugs or alcohol. These accounts were reinforced by Mr. Luis Antonio Cunha, the officer in charge of the case. Therefore, the possibility that she disappeared because of a possible feud or involvement with drugs was quickly ruled out. Geovana's personal history was analyzed, and since she had previously been part of a scout group, the possibility that she had entered a wooded area and gotten lost was also somewhat ruled out. According to the girl's mother, Geovana always took her makeup with her when she went out, items that she left at home on the 20th. She left with just the clothes she was wearing, no backpack, and without her cell phone. The hypothesis that she had run away from home also began to lose strength. Still in that month of May, Geovana's family received a phone call in which the informant claimed to have seen the girl's body at a landfill. Apparently, one of the employees at the site reported that the chain locking the access gate had been broken. A building window had also been broken. However, the search was unsuccessful and yielded no results, and the mystery surrounding the young woman's disappearance only grew. But at the beginning of June, a small detail would change the entire course of the investigation. While passing through a plot of land next to Geovana's family's property, the police authorities noticed a small pile of sand and concrete that didn't seem to belong there. In other words, someone had apparently dumped that construction material on that land. With this information and, let's say, a hunch, the investigators went to the girl's family home to check the rooms of the house. In Gabriel Martin's room, Geovana's brother, the floor material was very similar to the one found on the neighboring plot. So, the question remained, why was all that concrete and sand removed from Gabriel's room? The answer was both rather frightening and obvious. And if you already know what it is, leave a comment for me. I want to check it later. That's right, a grave. The digging of the hole in the room didn't take long until one of the police officers announced the discovery of a bag. It was Geovana's body. According to news reports aired by Cidade Alerta and also by the Geom portal, as soon as the police authorities discovered the girl's body, Sidney reportedly confessed that he killed his daughter. In the report published by Geom, it is stated that Sidney confessed he had used cocaine and, because of a fight, strangled Geovana to death. Just like Sidney, Gabriel was arrested. The girl's brother was arrested due to his alleged involvement in the crime. Police say Gabriel allegedly helped his father bury the body in his room. Gabriel reportedly responded to the accusation and arrest by saying he did not commit the crime, and that, in fact, he only arrived home after the girl disappeared, around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and that he had seen a fresh hole in the room. Regarding his criminal record, a source reveals that Sidney had already been convicted of drug trafficking before, and that, up until that time, the man had connections with a criminal organization. Sidney's arrest was converted to preventive detention, and the man was charged by the public prosecutor's office with qualified intentional homicide and concealment of a corpse. The indictment states Sidney allegedly strangled the girl on the 19th and buried her the next day, so that the neighbors wouldn't hear the sounds of the digging. Despite the initial arrest, Gabriel, the brother, was later released, and the public prosecutor's office requested the dismissal of the charges, since there was no evidence linking the young man to the crime. Therefore, he is innocent. While the civil police claim to have a video containing Sidney's confession, the man's defense argues that, since it did not meet legal requirements, such as the presence of a lawyer during the confession, everything Sidney said cannot be considered as evidence. Since the case happened recently, Sidney Martin's trial has not yet taken place. Despite the man's alleged confession, it is necessary to wait for the outcome of the judicial process to confirm or not his responsibility for the crime committed against Geovana.